Okay, this is chapter 35, section 3. We're going to talk about the divisions of the nervous system. So as we look at the nervous system, different parts of the nervous system have different functions and they have different structure as well. And so we're going to talk about each one of these divisions and some of the functions we believe they do, some of them we know that those are the functions for that part. So we'll go through this in section 3. Here's the important vocabulary that you'll need to know. Key concepts. Okay, so the central nervous system, it processes all the information in your body. So as something happens, it occurs internally or externally, your central nervous system is going to process this. This is going to relay messages from cells to other cells, to the brain, and it's going to also analyze information. This is an important part. So as it receives stimuli, it's going to be able to sort of break that down and figure out what the proper response is, and hopefully it gets it right. The two major divisions of the human nervous system is the central nervous system, and we'll talk mostly about this, and then the peripheral nervous system. We'll talk a little bit about this, not all that much. So here's a human brain. This is a preserved human brain, and in proportion to our size, we have the largest the largest brain of all organisms, and we have the most surface area. And so all these folds and grooves, so it's very wrinkly, especially in this portion of the brain. These increase the surface area. So we can discuss this a little more in class, but if you have a fold and a groove, that means you have surface area all along the top, but now you also have it down into these grooves and such. So that increases our processing capabilities and such. The outside portions of the brain are the most evolutionarily, how do you say it, new structures, whereas as we go towards the middle, they're the more vital and primitive functions that we see in other organisms as well. And so some of the key portions here, I'm going to show you a few diagrams, is we have three main parts of the brain that we talk about. We have the brain stem, that's from here to here, which actually has three different parts, but all you need to know is that that's the brain stem and that it's a major portion of the brain. We have the cerebellum. This is this little tiny brain in the back of your skull. And then we have the cerebrum, which is all the rest. So all of this is the cerebrum. It also has different lobes. So we have the frontal lobe, that's here. We have the parietal lobe, that's here. We have the occipital lobe, that's here. And the temporal lobe, which is right here. All these portions of the brain have different functions, and we've mapped the brain the best we can. So motor functions, in the frontal lobe, and all sorts of different things. We could literally spend a whole semester just talking about all the map of the brain and all of its functions and how it functions. But right now you just need to know the major portions, which the first three divisions: brainstem, cerebellum, cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest portion, and then that it's in four lobes. That's another key concept: occipital lobe, parietal lobe, frontal lobe, and temporal lobe, which is the four lobes of the brain, and they all have different functions. The brain is divided up into two hemispheres, and so you have a left hemisphere, right, like this, and then the right hemisphere. This is looking at the top of the brain. And so the left hemisphere is actually going to control motor functions on the right half of your body, whereas the right hemisphere, I guess I could put an R here and an L here, the right hemisphere is going to control motor functions on the left half of your body. So there's two hemispheres, right hemisphere and left hemisphere. This is just a funny picture that I found, and I had to put it on here. So the human brain, just some excuse me, interesting different facts here. We have 100 billion neurons in the human brain. That's unbelievable number. If you think about it, you could never count that high, and it's just a remarkable number. And there's different types, and so there's many different types of neurons, and they look quite different, and they have different functions according to their structure. And then the mass of the brain for every one, plus or minus just slightly, is 1.4 kilograms, or equivalent to 3.1 pounds. So that's really for everyone. There's just slight variation here and there, but it's ever so slight. So the mass of the human brain is about that. So let's talk about the cerebrum. That's one of the three main portions of the brain. And this is the largest part of the brain. And it's responsible for a whole lot. So it's most recently evolved, and it controls any voluntary thing. So any voluntary action that you do, it's because of the cerebrum. It's also gives us conscious thought, including things like making judgments, learning like you're doing right now, and your intelligence. And then it has folds and grooves, which is unique for many organisms. Don't have this, folds and grooves on the surface, and this increases the surface area greatly. So the folds and grooves increase the surface area greatly, which increases the processes. I got to learn how to spell better with this pen, but increases the capacity of processing information. The cerebellum is the second largest region of the brain, and if we go back, so just to remind you, I should have put it in order. Cerebrum, which we just talked about, is the large portion of the brain here, and then the cerebellum, which we'll talk about right now, is this small little tiny part in the back. And so the cerebellum is the second largest region of the brain, and it has a lot to do, well, there's many different functions. We're not going to be able to talk about all of them, but the main thing is it helps you to coordinate and balance actions in your muscles. So this is your ability to walk gracefully and efficiently, or run and jump and those sorts of things. It coordinates that sort of activity. Cerebellum means little brain, so that's in the back of your skull. So if you didn't know the orientation, sorry, this is where the eyes are. Weird eye, right in the front right here, and then this is the back of your skull back here. Okay, this is your mouth and your nose, I guess. Anyways, so that is that. Your brainstem. So the brainstem is that third portion of your brain. It connects the brain and the spinal cord, and this regulates information between the brain and the rest of the body. So the brainstem is sort of a central point. It's the most primitive part of the brain, and it relays information to the cerebrum and such. The major important thing here is it controls vital functions such as blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, should be comma here, and swallowing. So very vital functions are the brainstem, and this is why we know it's a primitive part of the brain, is because all organisms have this part of the brain that controls heart rate and breathing and such, and this is all involuntary functions.